Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever noticed that two people can have the same job, the same tools, and the same hours, yet one creates impact while the other simply completes tasks? The difference isn't skill, it's mindset. It's how they see their role in the bigger picture. One works for a paycheck, the other works for a purpose. One waits for direction, the other creates direction. The truth is, leadership is not a position, it's a way of thinking. We live in a world that rewards activity, not always contribution. Many people are busy being busy, doing what's asked, following instructions, checking boxes, and yet they never feel fulfilled. But those who think like leaders see work differently. They don't just ask, "What must I do?" They ask, "Why does this matter? How can I make it better? Who does this serve?" That's what separates workers from leaders. A worker does what's necessary. A leader does what's meaningful. And today I want to share with you 5 principles that can help you start thinking like a leader, no matter what title you hold or where you are in your journey. Workers focus on what needs to be done. Leaders focus on why it needs to be done. That's the first and most defining difference between the two. One person wakes up in the morning thinking about the tasks waiting on their desk, the emails to answer, the deadlines to meet. The other wakes up thinking about the impact they can make, the purpose behind their work, and the difference they can leave by the end of the day. The first survives the day, the second shapes it. When you think like a worker, your world becomes small, limited to to-do lists and checkboxes. Every task feels like an obligation. But when you think like a leader, that same work transforms into something meaningful. You begin to see the bigger picture, the story you're helping to tell, the mission you're contributing to, the people your work will touch. It's not about doing more. It's about understanding why you're doing it in the first place. Imagine a construction site where 2 people are laying bricks. If you ask the first person what they're doing, they might say, "I'm laying bricks." Ask the second, and they might say, "I'm building a cathedral that will inspire generations." Same task, same tools. But one person is connected to a vision much larger than themselves. That's the difference between a worker's mindset and a leader's mindset. One is driven by obligation, the other by purpose. This shift in mindset changes everything: your motivation, your creativity, even your energy. When you focus only on tasks, fatigue sets in faster. You feel like you're endlessly running on a treadmill, moving but never progressing. But when you connect your work to a purpose, it gives you fuel. Suddenly, even the hard days have meaning. The late nights feel worth it. The challenges become part of the story you're building, not just obstacles in your way. In organizations, this difference is visible everywhere. The employees who see their work as a job often wait for someone to tell them what to do next. But those who think like leaders, no matter their title, look for how their role contributes to the whole. They ask better questions. Instead of, "What should I do?" they ask, "What needs to be done to move us closer to our goal?" That question alone transforms the way they work, because it's no longer about personal performance, it's about shared progress. There's a story of 2 janitors who worked at NASA in the 1960 seconds. When one was asked what he did, he said, "I clean floors." When the other was asked, he replied, "I'm helping put a man on the moon." Think about that. Both were doing the same job, yet one saw his role as a small piece of a monumental mission. That's leadership thinking. It's not about your title, it's about your perspective. Leaders see connections where others see compartments. They understand that every role, every effort, every small decision contributes to something greater. They don't measure their worth by the size of their task, but by the impact of their contribution. And because they see the bigger picture, they naturally inspire others to do the same. Purpose spreads when one person works with vision. It lifts the entire team. When you shift from thinking about what you do to why you do it, your priorities change. You stop chasing quick wins and start building lasting value. You start caring not just about getting the job done, but about doing it right. You think beyond your own checklist and start thinking about how your work affects the mission, the team, and even the customers or community you serve. Thinking like a leader doesn't require a promotion, it requires perspective. The moment you start seeing your work as part of something greater, you step into leadership. Because leadership is not about being in charge. It's about being connected to purpose, to people, and to progress. And that connection gives meaning to everything you do. So when you show up tomorrow, don't just ask yourself, "What do I need to do today?" Ask, "Why am I doing this? Who will it serve? What will it build?" Because when your why is clear, your what becomes powerful. That's how ordinary work becomes extraordinary impact. Workers wait for instructions, leaders take ownership. That's one of the clearest ways to separate those who simply show up from those who truly make things happen. A worker waits for someone to tell them what to do next, while a leader looks around, sees what needs to be done, and takes responsibility for making it happen. Ownership isn't about authority. It's about attitude. It's about seeing yourself as part of the solution, not a bystander to the problem. When you take ownership, something powerful shifts inside you. You stop saying, "That's not my job," and start asking, "How can I help?" You stop waiting for permission and start taking initiative. You begin to act not because someone told you to, but because you understand why it matters. That's when trust starts to build, because people can always feel when someone genuinely cares about the outcome. There's a story about a young employee working at a hotel. One day, a guest arrived exhausted after a long flight, but her luggage had been misplaced. The worker could have said, "That's not my department," and directed her to the front desk. Instead, he took ownership. He called the airline, tracked down the missing bag, and personally delivered it to her room later that night. He wasn't a manager, but that day, he was a leader. Because leadership isn't about job titles, it's about the willingness to take responsibility for things that matter. The truth is, ownership and initiative are what create progress. Every great organization, every remarkable achievement exists because someone cared enough to take responsibility before being asked. Think about the people you admire in your company, in your family, in your community. What sets them apart? It's not that they're always right, it's that they step up when it counts. They don't wait for instructions, they take action. They see problems as opportunities to contribute, not burdens to avoid. And yet, many people hold back because they fear stepping outside their lane. They think, if I speak up, what if I'm wrong? What if I overstep? But here's the truth, real leaders don't worry about looking perfect. They focus on doing what's right. Mistakes can be corrected. Indifference cannot. A worker mindset seeks to avoid blame. A leader mindset seeks to create change. The difference between the two is courage, the courage to care enough to act. In one tech company, a junior engineer noticed a recurring bug that caused system slowdowns. It wasn't in his assigned area, but he decided to investigate anyway. After days of analysis, he discovered the root cause and proposed a fix that saved the company thousands of dollars a month. When asked why he spent so much time on something that wasn't technically his problem, he said, "Because it was our users' problem." That's ownership. That's leadership. Taking ownership also changes how others see you. When people notice that you consistently go beyond what's expected, they start to trust you more deeply. They see you as dependable, as someone who can be counted on not just to do the job, but to protect the mission. And that trust compounds it, opens doors, builds influence, and eventually shapes culture. Because one person's decision to take ownership inspires others to do the same. Responsibility is contagious. When you think like a worker, you focus on tasks. You wait for directions, and when the job is done, you move on. But when you think like a leader, you see yourself as a steward of outcomes. You understand that success doesn't belong to one person or one department, it belongs to everyone who contributes. You stop thinking in terms of mine and theirs, and start thinking in terms of ours. That mindset changes everything. Imagine what would happen if every person in an organization thought this way, if everyone took initiative instead of waiting, if everyone treated the company's mission as their personal responsibility. There would be less blame, fewer excuses, and far more progress. That's the kind of culture where innovation thrives, trust deepens, and excellence becomes the standard. Ownership isn't about control, it's about care. It's not about having all the answers, it's about being willing to find them. When you take ownership, you become invested in the outcome not because someone will reward you, but because you believe in the work itself. And that belief, that willingness to take responsibility before being asked, is the essence of leadership. It's the difference between working for something and standing for something. Workers look for stability, but leaders look for growth. That's the truth many people don't want to face. Because growth means change, and change is uncomfortable. But comfort never built anything extraordinary. Every great story, every remarkable breakthrough, every powerful transformation begins with someone who decided to step outside the comfort of the familiar and into the uncertainty of growth. When you think like a worker, your goal is to avoid risk, to do your job well enough to stay safe. You find a rhythm, a routine, and you cling to it because it feels secure. But security can be deceptive. The same routine that makes you feel comfortable can also make you stagnant. You might not realize it, but slowly your curiosity fades, your creativity shrinks, your courage weakens. And one day, you look around and realize you're surviving, not evolving. Leaders think differently. They see discomfort not as danger, but as an invitation. They understand that growth only happens when you're stretched, when you take on challenges you've never faced before. They ask questions that don't have easy answers. They make decisions that might not work, and that's the point. Because growth is not about certainty, it's about expansion. It's about learning, adapting, and becoming more capable with every mistake, every setback, every uncomfortable moment. Think about how muscles grow. They don't get stronger by being comfortable, they grow through resistance. Each repetition tears the muscle slightly, and the body rebuilds it stronger than before. Growth in life works the same way. Without resistance, there's no strength. Without discomfort, there's no evolution. Leaders embrace that process. They see failure as feedback, not as a reason to stop. They see challenge as training, not punishment. There's a story about a young sales associate who worked in a company where the manager noticed her potential. One day, he gave her a new territory, one that had failed for years. The previous team members had all quit, calling it impossible. Most people would have seen it as a punishment, but she saw it as an opportunity. She spent weeks learning about the clients, understanding their frustrations, and finding small ways to build trust. Within a year, that dead zone became one of the company's top performing areas. When asked how she did it, she said, "I decided to stop avoiding hard things. That's where I learned the most." That's what thinking like a leader looks like. It's seeing the challenge and saying, "This will teach me something." It's recognizing that failure isn't fatal, stagnation is. The people who achieve the most in life aren't the ones who avoid discomfort. They're the ones who use it to grow. A study from Stanford University showed that people with a growth mindset, those who see abilities as something that can be developed, outperform those with a fixed mindset by nearly 40% over time. Why? Because they don't see struggle as a stop sign. They see it as a signal that they're moving forward. The truth is, growth is never glamorous. It's messy, it's uncertain, it's often lonely. But every moment of discomfort carries within it the seed of transformation. Leaders understand that if you only do what's easy, you'll stay where you are. If you want to evolve, you must lean into the things that make you uneasy. That's where progress lives. We all crave stability because it gives us a sense of control. But the world doesn't reward comfort. It rewards courage. The future belongs to those who adapt, who learn, who dare to stretch beyond their limits. It's not about being fearless. It's about being brave enough to act in spite of fear. Every time you step into uncertainty, you prove to yourself that you're capable of more than you thought. Growth changes not just what you can do, but who you become. It expands your vision, deepens your resilience, and builds confidence that no one can take away. The more you challenge yourself, the more capable you feel. And that capability becomes the foundation of true leadership. So the next time you find yourself choosing between what's comfortable and what's challenging, remember this. Comfort keeps you where you are, but growth takes you where you're meant to be. Workers often compete to be seen, but leaders strive to make others seen. That's one of the most powerful distinctions between the two. A worker focuses on recognition. They want to be acknowledged for what they've done. A leader focuses on contribution. They want others to succeed because of what they've done. The worker's question is, how can I stand out? The leader's question is, how can I lift others up? And that simple shift in mindset transforms everything. True leadership is not about being in charge. It's about taking care of those in your charge. When you think like a worker, success is personal. It's about your performance, your progress, your reward. But when you think like a leader, success becomes collective. It's about creating an environment where others can thrive, where people feel safe to take risks, where ideas can grow freely without fear of being dismissed or judged. We've all worked with people who guard their knowledge, who protect their position, who see others as competition. That's the worker mindset. It comes from fear, fear of being replaced, fear of not being enough, fear that someone else's success will diminish their own. But real leaders operate from abundance. They know that when others grow, the team grows. When the team grows, the mission advances. And when the mission advances, everyone wins. I once met a manager who understood this deeply. She was leading a team of young professionals, and instead of using her authority to control them, she used it to empower them. She encouraged them to speak up in meetings, to take ownership of projects, to make mistakes and learn. Within a year, her team became one of the most innovative and motivated groups in the company. Not because she had all the answers, but because she believed in their potential. She wasn't threatened by their growth, she was inspired by it. That's what leadership looks like. Leadership isn't about standing on top, it's about standing beside. It's about realizing that your job is not to shine alone, but to help others shine brighter. The best leaders don't crave followers, they create more leaders. They don't build empires of control. They build communities of trust. When people feel supported, they give their best. When they feel valued, they become more creative, more committed, more courageous. And here's something remarkable. When you empower others, your own influence doesn't shrink. It expands. Because people remember how you made them feel. They remember who believed in them when they doubted themselves. They remember who gave them a chance to grow. Those moments of empowerment build loyalty, not because of authority, but because of connection. Think about the leaders who've made the biggest difference in your life. chances are they weren't the ones who told you what to do. They were the ones who made you believe you could do it. Maybe it was a teacher who saw potential in you that you couldn't yet see. Maybe it was a mentor who pushed you to aim higher. Maybe it was a colleague who encouraged you to take a risk when you were afraid to fail. Those people didn't just change what you did, they changed how you saw yourself. That's the kind of influence that lasts long after the job titles fade. Empowerment doesn't require grand gestures. Sometimes it's as simple as listening, encouraging, or trusting someone to handle something important. It's about giving others space to grow instead of controlling every outcome. It's about replacing I with we. Because when people feel trusted, they rise to meet that trust. A true leader measures success not by how much control they have, but by how much confidence they build in others. They know that leadership isn't about climbing higher, it's about lifting higher. When you think like a worker, you compete for attention. When you think like a leader, you create opportunities for others to succeed. And that's where real legacy begins, not in what you achieve alone, but in how many lives you help elevate along the way. Workers think about finishing the day, but leaders think about shaping the future. That's the fundamental difference between living for now and building for what's next. A worker's mindset is focused on survival, getting through the tasks, completing the checklist, and reaching the weekend. A leader's mindset is focused on growth, asking, what can I build today that will still matter years from now? Thinking long-term is what separates those who react to life from those who design it. The challenge is that we live in a world obsessed with instant results. We want success now, recognition now, progress now. We've been conditioned to measure value in speed, how fast we can get things done, how quickly we can see the outcome. But leadership isn't about rushing to finish. It's about laying foundations that last. It's about planting seeds knowing you might not be the one to sit under the shade of the tree they grow into. When you think short-term, you prioritize what's urgent. When you think long-term, you prioritize what's important. Those two things rarely align. The urgent will always scream louder, the deadlines, the messages, the constant noise of modern life. But the important things, the relationships, the vision, the strategy, they whisper. They require stillness, reflection, and patience. And leaders are those who learn to listen to the whispers amidst the noise. There's a story about an engineer who designed bridges early in his career. He was known for being meticulous, always checking every detail, even when others thought he was being overly cautious. When asked why, he said, because one day my grandchildren might drive across this bridge. That's what it means to think like a leader. It's about creating something that lasts, something you can stand behind years later with pride, knowing you built it with integrity. Leaders don't chase temporary victories. They build systems that outlive them. They don't focus on how something looks today. They focus on whether it will still hold strong tomorrow. And that kind of thinking requires discipline, the discipline to delay gratification, to resist shortcuts, to keep showing up when progress feels slow. Because the truth is, long-term success is built in the quiet, consistent work that no one applauds. It's built in the moments when you choose patience over panic, principle over pressure. Every company, every movement, every legacy that has stood the test of time was built by people who thought beyond their lifetime. They understood that impact is not measured by what you accomplish today, but by what you make possible for tomorrow. The great builders, innovators, and visionaries all had one thing in common: they thought generationally. They weren't just trying to win the moment. They were trying to change what the moment meant for everyone who came after them. Think of how this applies in your own life. When you invest in developing people rather than just using them to complete tasks, you're thinking long-term. When you choose to act with integrity even when no one's watching, you're thinking long-term. When you focus on building trust instead of chasing approval, you're thinking long-term. Every choice either builds your legacy or erodes it, and the difference lies in perspective. It's easy to get caught up in the race of now, to measure progress by what's visible, by what can be achieved quickly. But the truth is, the most meaningful results in life often take the longest to grow. Trust takes years to build. Character takes decades to form. Legacy takes a lifetime to craft. And leaders understand that what's built slowly tends to last longer. They're not chasing the spotlight, they're building the stage. So, when you think like a leader, you stop asking, how can I win today? And start asking, what can I build today that will matter tomorrow? You start to realize that your actions ripple far beyond your timeline, that every decision, every effort, every act of integrity contributes to something much greater than yourself. Because leadership isn't about finishing strong for the moment, it's about building something strong, enough to last forever. So, when you choose to think like a leader instead of a worker, you make a shift that changes everything: how you see, how you act, and how you inspire. You stop moving just to stay busy and start moving with purpose. You stop working for approval and start building for impact. Because leadership isn't about titles or authority, it's about mindset, responsibility, and vision. The real difference between a worker and a leader isn't in what they do, it's in why they do it. One shows up to complete a job, the other shows up to make a difference. One waits for direction, the other creates it. And every single one of us has the power to make that choice. When you start thinking like a leader, you'll notice that your environment changes too, not because it suddenly becomes easier, but because you begin to see possibilities where others see problems. You start to inspire the people around you, not through position, but through example. And that's how movements are built, not by people doing what they're told, but by people daring to think differently. So wherever you are, whatever your title, whatever your role, lead in the way you show up, lead in the way you care, lead in the way you take ownership of your purpose. Because when you start thinking like a leader, you don't just change your work, you change your world.